In today's video, we are starting a creative build series here on my channel. In this series, we'll be building a world together and we're going to attempt to create the ultimate aesthetic experience. So we're going to start right now and we're going to begin by taking a look at what is right in front of us. In preparation for this episode, I started by creating a landmass that is basically a floating island, and on top of it, I added some structures. And right now we have sketched out the rough shape of the buildings. I included just enough details so that you can vaguely tell the style that we're going for, but there is still a lot of work to do. So for today's episode, we'll mostly focus on decorating the main castle building that is at the center here. And as you can see, in its current form, this castle is not looking so good. So for one thing, the roof is not quite complete, which means we're going to start by doing some work here, and we're going to accomplish that by introducing some curves on each one of the corners. As you can see, while building this castle, I made this castle a mega size build. The size is huge and intentionally imposing so that everyone can see the castle even at a distance. And it is for the same reason that we are going to add some gold blocks to highlight the contour of this castle. Now at this point, I'm still not quite sure what to do here. I think these gold blocks look really good on this roof, but we still need to figure out a way to build with them in a way that looks natural. On each side of this castle, I incorporated many adjustments to give the roof a rather dynamic look, which includes these huge triangles. And here I am working on further refining one of such triangles. And overall, I am quite satisfied with how the castle is looking so far. For one thing, the castle is not going to look too boring because the structure now looks different on each side. But that also means a lot of work went into making everything look right. So despite the different layouts on each side of the castle, the overall design still looks balanced. Also, do you remember the gold blocks that we placed earlier in this episode? So after a day or two passed in real life, I was able to come up with a design that utilizes these gold blocks, but not in a way that the gold blocks stand out too much. Instead, as you can see on the finished product on the left-hand side of the screen, the gold blocks are going to be built into the structure, almost concealed, but one can still notice slivers of gold color when looking at the roof from afar. The next in-game day is all about working on the transition between the roof and the walls, and this part that we're working on here probably has a technical name that I do not know of, and if you happen to know what these are called, please leave a comment below and let me know, because that would be very impressive to say the least. But anyhow, these things that I'm adding right now underneath the roof are a common feature of Japanese castles. To me, at least functionally speaking, these structures appear to help to support the weight of the roof, which is why I'm starting this process by using dark oak blocks, which I thought would sort of resemble raw, unpainted wood beams that have withstood the test of weather. So throughout the day, I worked on creating these structures, and it felt like that the design I came up with was onto something. However, when I took a step back on the second day and looked at the castle in its entirety, I decided that what I came up with was not exactly right. To be fair, there's nothing wrong with what we have built so far, but we can clearly do better. So as you can see, I began to undo the work from the previous day, mainly because the darker color of the wooden blocks has now resulted in a bit of a sensory overload by introducing a brand new color, whereas I wanted the castle to look clean, elegant, and eye-catching. So from here, we're going to begin the second attempt at building the support beams of our roof, and this time we're going to be using quartz blocks instead, and immediately I could tell that this is exactly the color that I'm looking for, which provided assurance that we are on the right track. I drew inspiration from a particular real-life castle when coming up with this block palette, and here is a reference photo I found on Google for a quick comparison. But as you can see, we are going to start from the top layer and work our way down. While adding the support beams, it also occurred to me that this section of the roof is a great place to add a few more gold blocks to accentuate this castle. And luckily, now that we have some experience with adding gold blocks to become a part of this roof, I was able to quickly come up with a design and move on to the next steps. And now we're working our way down to these two levels that you are seeing here. I wanted to include this close-up shot of the design pattern that we're working on right now. In order to make this castle as engaging and interesting as possible, each level of this castle is going to have its own distinct, unique design. And to me, it was completely worth it to just take the time and chisel out the patterns. At this point, the castle roof is pretty much good to go. The final step is just a quick touch-up. We are really just going to place down a ton of these half slabs in order to introduce a texture to this roof. The design here is meant to look like the type of tiled roofs that are common among traditional East Asian houses. And here is another example. As you can imagine, this was quite a boring and laborious process, which involves placing down the same block in the same pattern over and over again. In fact, we're going to speed up the video here to get through the footage, and to be honest, I was only able to accomplish this by watching my favorite YouTube channels on the side. And we're also going to skip ahead here because, once again, this part of the building process is quite boring. The next part, however, demands a lot more creativity, which is placing down windows to bring this castle to its completion. We are going to start by working on a design for a larger window, such as the one that I'm working on right now. I begin by figuring out the contour of this window and slowly filled in the empty space with a design that is fitting in terms of theme. Coincidentally, the window also has the shape of a traditional Japanese board game piece, which I thought was appropriate. And on the floors above, we're going to place down smaller windows. There is quite a sharp contrast between the larger windows and the small ones, but it made sense because some of the floors are quite narrow and only provided limited space to place down windows. But as you can see, once we have placed down the windows, the castle is technically completed, although we will come back to add texture for this castle in a later episode in the series. So before we wrap up this video, I do want to clarify that even though we have only worked on this castle today, that is not how future episodes in this series are going to look like. The first episode in every build series is always in an awkward position because there are always less things to be showcased. So here I'm going to complete just one more project for today. And I have been thinking about a design for an exterior wall for a Japanese style castle, so I'm going to give it a try right now. And in future episodes, we are going to continue working on the structures that are ancillary to this Japanese castle, things like paths, vegetation, gates, stairs, to name a few. But for now, let's finish the backside of this wooden defense wall. And here is a decorative pattern that I came up with, which happens to be a fitting addition to these wooden walls, so I replicated this design a few more times. And that concludes our progress on this Japanese castle for this week. I wanted to thank everyone who is watching for the support for this channel, which really motivates me to make better and better content every time. I also hope that you will enjoy the format of this creative build series, something that I'm trying to get back into. So as always, I am always open for suggestions and will be responding to comments as much as I can. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.